Hello and welcome to New Wave Global. And I'm joined by Kamran Bokhari, a senior respected analyst and author based in Washington, D.C. He's currently working with the New Lines think tank, which is an institute on regional and global affairs. And he has a rich experience of working as both a writer, an analyst, as well as a geopolitical expert. So, Kamran, thank you for joining me. And you know why we are talking? We are talking about Iran, Israel uh, tensions, and how Israel's well staged, well publicized attack, quote unquote, I would call it, on Israel obviously was thwarted and could not get anywhere. But Israel sort of made a point of crossing that particular line in so many decades that had existed, as if, yes, there would be lots of threat and lots of public rallies and statements from the Iranian leadership and people, but actual attack would not occur. And now this obviously begs the question, what is Israel going to do next? Is Israel going to restrain itself, or is it going to do another retaliatory act which may lead to a full scale war, which many fear could very well turn into a World War III? Yes, Kamran.
Thank you, Raza. Yes, there's a lot of hyperbole about World War III and that there will be a world war again. But let's face the reality. What do we mean by a world war? A world war means that there is war happening at a global scale. It's not a single war, but there are multiple wars going on. And some would argue, and some have argued, some very good strategic thinkers and analysts have made the case in many publications that there is so much similarity between the two world wars or the time before the two world wars and the current moment. So I think that we're already somewhere creeping around at that point. Will there be a world war? I don't know. And if I had to guess, if I had to sort of make a call, I'd say there's substantive difference between the conditions that existed before World War One and World War Two and what we have today. But anyway, let's get back to Israel and Iran. Look, you're absolutely right. We are in a new era right now. It's as if after the attack yesterday, last night by Iran on Israel, it's as if we have closed the door on one era and we're in a new era where Iran has done something that we thought was rhetoric, we thought was hyperbole, a lot of chest thumping and beating, but in reality would not happen. Now, so there is obviously we're in a new place that puts a lot of pressure on the Israelis to respond. Will they respond? Yes and no. Yes, because there is an imperative that they do not want to see Iran emboldened by this. And they therefore have to do it. But we see that it doesn't seem like they're going to do it anytime soon. At least that's what we're getting from the statements and the positions of the Israeli government. But I think that sooner rather than later, there will be some form of retaliatory action. We don't know what form that will take. We don't know when that will happen, because unlike what the Iranians did, which was a very choreographed, telegraphed, attack that was designed by design, meant to be thwarted, because the Iranians did not want if you will, lead to an escalation. And then there's also a question of capabilities. This is the first time that Iran has fired missiles and drones at that distance. When you have a latent capability, you have hardware, and you think you have capability, but if you haven't used it, it means it's untested. You don't know if it's going to succeed. So there are a lot of reasons why the Iranians tried to play it safe, if you will, by basically telling in advance that this is what's going to happen. The president of the United States had it down to 48 hours. and it happened during that time period. So that's not by coincidence. That's because they had intelligence. There's a lot of back channel activity going on. So that was the Iranian approach. I doubt that if the Israelis, when the Israelis strike back, that they will follow the similar MO. I think there's going to be a heavy element of surprise. It's not going to be performative. It is going to be, yes, there will be the imperative to make sure that that it doesn't lead to another level of escalation. But at the same time, the Iranians have, the Israelis have this imperative to make sure that they are not attacked again. Because once you cross that line, it becomes a new norm. Something hasn't happened, and until it doesn't happen, you're good. But once it happened, you don't know whether this was a one-off or it will happen again. And most likely, and we're seeing this coming from the head of the IRGC, Major General Hussein Salami, who openly said today that this is our new cadence. This is how we will operate if we are attacked again. Now, I didn't make it clear whether we're attacked in the form of embassy. I think there's some vague language that if our personnel are killed or if our interests are attacked, then we will respond in this way. So if they're saying it and the Israelis are assuming that, then we have to assume that the Israelis are not going to just say, oh, well, you know what, the US and the British and the Jordanians helped us and we blunted this attack and then, now we're even. I don't think that's the thinking in Israel.
Okay, well, good to know that. But as you know, that President Biden yesterday made a public statement, and the very, again, it has been a very cautious statement by the US, and in particular with a view that, oh, we are not going to get any further involved. Now, that was very, there was all support and solidarity with Israel by the US, by the UK, by EU, etc., etc., even the United Nations Security Council. But Kamran, at some point now, we know that Netanyahu is kind of isolated on the global stage. He is unpopular at home. He is pursuing a disproportionate use of force in Gaza, leading to a global uproar, especially in the United States. I mean, you have been here for a long time in North America, and at least I've been here for a decade. I've never seen the kind of support for Palestinians that I see on the streets and in the public sphere. Now, Biden is in a thick soup as well. So, do you think? I mean, what options if this tension, conflict escalates? You hinted there could be a surprise attack, there could be a surprise strategy by Israel. If this escalates, what is the US going to do? Obviously, it will back Israel, but can the US attack Iran directly, like Iraq? And, there's so many other precedents, Libya. What do you foresee there?
So, look, I mean, each of those precedents are unique.
Hmm.
Libya was a unique situation. Iraq was a unique situation. Two different administrations, two very different circumstances. The only scenario in which the United States attacks Iran is if Iran first targets the United States. Note that after the embassy hit, the United States, this administration, the Biden White House, went out of its way to telegraph and to tell and convey to the Iranians, we were not involved in the attack on your embassy, and therefore we don't want you to bring this fight to us. So we had nothing to do with it. Likewise, the Iranians also telegraph that, look, we're going to retaliate. We don't want you getting into this fight that's between us and Israel. So I think both Tehran and Washington have an imperative to stay out of this. So so as long as the Iranians in a counter strike do not target American forces, then I think what is going to happen is this is going to remain within Israel, between Israel and Iran. Yes, it becomes far more difficult because let's say Iran hits back harder after it is attacked in a future potential scenario. then does the United States come to Israel's aid once again? What does that look like? Uh, what the United States has made clear, and from what you just mentioned, is that the United States said, look, we came to your defense, but if you go on the offense, then we're not participating in that operation.
Clear message.
It was a clear message. And I think that that is a genuine message. And I don't
But Netanyahu really wants the US to come into the game, directly, because that is his best possible sort of support that he's looking for.
Yes, and if you and I know that and agree that that is what he's doing, you have to assume that a man who's been in politics for 6 decades also knows that. I'm talking about the president.
Yes.
So he is not just going to sleepwalk into, at least not intentionally, into some form of a crisis. He's not going to fall for that. So I think that yes, it's in the interest of the current Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and his allies to drag the United States into it. I also would say that it may be in the interest of other Israeli leaders as well, the Israeli establishment as well, that look, we need America's help to counter Iran. America should be with us. We shouldn't do this alone. So I get that. But look, Israel is a regional power. The United States is a superpower. They are close allies, but as we've seen, that there is a divergence of interest. And this is not the first time that we've seen a diversion of interest. During the Obama years, there was a huge diversion of interest when the Obama administration decided to do the nuclear negotiations. Israel was not happy about that.
No.
You go back even further to Bush Sr., to Bush 41. In 1991, he basically threatened to withhold the $10 billion loan guarantees if the Israelis did not negotiate with the PLO. So look, these are two separate countries. It's not like automatically somehow the United States is going to be dragged in. Again, it depends on if the United States is attacked. Now, if the Iranians, and I don't see why they would do that, they would want to be able to, they want to keep the US out of this because they think that they can deal with Israel on their own.
And that's what
the US isn't there.
And media reports also suggest that there have been back-channel contacts between the US and Iran, in which basically that is Iran, as you said, did these performative air strikes and also told the US that if you get into it, then it can get worse or whatever. But let me ask you, one of the central, or the elephant in the room is the situation in Gaza, where there's a famine, there's starvation, most of the population is displaced, more than 32,000 people are dead, including kids, universities, schools, hospitals have been bombed. Now, that is the underlying issue. So you tell me, what do you think that there could be some kind of a diplomatic solution in the offing? Because that may help ease some of these tensions as well. Because Biden is under pressure from his home constituency.
So President Biden needs the Middle East, Gaza, Israel, Iran out of the news, at least out of the headlines, because he has an election coming up. He'd like to be able to make this about Trump and not something else. But that's easier said than done. I think that if you just look at the cycle of violence, if you look at what is it more that the Israelis will do, there is this talk about an operation in Rafah, the southern town where the bulk of those who became refugees and internally displaced people from the north have basically been ensconced. And they're in open air camps and whatnot. It's a very terrible situation. It's a massive humanitarian crisis. So this is why you have in the U.S. Developing the capability to deliver aid through sea. You see the airdrops going on. You see the pressure on Israel to open up border crossings, which they have. You see the withdrawal of forces from several parts of Gaza. I think this war is close to its logical conclusion. I think what needs to be done is two things, and we don't know what order they will take place. Uh, the release of hostages,
Of
and then, of
course.
course, making sure that Hamas as a fighting force in the south, in the Rafah area, in the southern area, near the southern end of the strip, near the Egyptian border, is also neutralized. And so, in other words, imposing military defeat. I know the Israelis talk about destroying, and there's all sorts of language being used, but the destroying assumes that you bring something to zero, and you can't bring something that's a social movement to zero. So probably what's a more realistic goal is to make sure that it does not have the fighting capability that it still currently has, and it has no ability to continue to rule Gaza. So I think that that's what's left. That will continue. That goal, I don't think the United States disagrees, whether this administration or a future Trump administration. I don't think there's a disagreement with the Israelis on that. What the disagreement is, and both President Trump, former President Trump, and current President Biden have come out saying the same thing: that look, you're damaging your reputation with the way you're prosecuting this war. You can still prosecute the war, but you need to provide for humanitarian relief. And you need to do, and former President Trump has come out saying, do it and do it fast. And you don't want to be spending more time on this, because he knows that if he is to come to office, then he doesn't want to inherit this. This is his mess. So there's a lot of pressure on Israel to do that. And I think that pressure is a key reason why we haven't seen sort of a knee-jerk response to yesterday's Iranian attack. Because I think the Israelis understand that what they've started in Gaza needs to reach to its logical conclusion. Whatever that looks like, we're not really sure about that. But you can't leave it halfway and then go fight Iran and then go fight Hezbollah. You can't be all over the place. You have to remain focused. So I think that, in the coming weeks, barring any unforeseen circumstances, we're going to see, I think that there would be two things that would happen. There would be provision of humanitarian relief on one hand to, the people of Gaza, but at the same time, there'll be a far more concerted, far more targeted effort to get to the remaining Hamas people, whatever that looks like. We don't know what that looks like. It could be a large force. It could be a much smaller force. It's going to be difficult because the battle box contains Hamas underground, and above ground you have the people. So it's very difficult to do this. But somehow, and I think that this is what the conversation is taking place at the technical level between the Biden White House and the Netanyahu government in terms of how do you actually execute this? How do you actually make sure that more civilians are not killed, humanitarian relief is provided while you still go after Hamas? So this is a technical problem that has to be solved through intelligence and through military planning.
Indeed. I've been reading about that, and I don't know what happens, but Kamran, one thing is clear, that after so many people dead and devastation at a mass scale, Joe Biden will have to pay a price, because it's my tax dollars and your tax dollars. If they are going to the killing of innocent civilians in violation of international humanitarian law, then it is a matter of concern. So our time really is up, but thank you for joining me. And I hope that you give us more time in the coming weeks as the situation unfolds. It's very fluid at the moment, but certainly we also have to get to the point as to how much of Joe Biden's goose is cooked for November elections. But that's for next week. Thank you, Kamran.
Take care.